This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome once again to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world of politics and international happenings and media and anything and everything else that we interact with during the course of our week. And we take a look at these things from a higher perspective. And what I mean by a higher perspective, we take a step back. We recognize the oneness that we are. We recognize the truth of who we are, and we recognize the illusions or the games of what is going on around us. And we take a look at these stories to see what we're creating and what it may possibly be telling us about ourselves. When we have tragedies like we've had with the recent shootings that have taken place, when we have conflict at home or abroad, all of these things are telling us about our belief in separateness and reminding us that that belief is false, and that the truth of ourselves is in our oneness. So when we look at these stories in that way, we remind ourselves who and what we are. And we also participate in, I guess you could call it a hologram. We participate in something that's exciting and like a roller coaster ride full of emotion. And ultimately, when we realize that it is, a hologram, it's like watching a movie, where you get really caught up in the plot, and you can feel those emotions, but, behind it all, you do understand that it's not the truth of who you are. So, the focus of our show recently, as I mentioned, was to talk about this era of transition in which we live. And I call it an era of transition because what I realized, for the past few years, since 2012 actually, I have been talking about this astrological alignment between, or conflict between the planets of Uranus and the planet, and I still refer to it as a planet even though the astrologers or astronomers don't, Pluto, and what that meant. That meant an era of, or that meant social upheaval and change and, turmoil in a kind of a one step forward, two steps back kind of way. And a lot of things emerged from that period of time. The Arab Spring, the gap in income and inequality, and the gap in, the 1%ers versus the 99%. Many things came into focus. Let's just put it that way, into focus. Including the next phase of civil rights, which is, going on as we speak with groups like Black Lives Matter, which are taking on the policies of police departments across the country, the actions of police officers, certain police officers, not all, but certain police officers, towards African Americans and other ethnic minorities in cities that are experiencing, undue force in many circumstances. And that has become front and center. It's not like this was. It's not that this was something new that just started happening. It's been happening all along. It's just because of those, and I say it's due to those astrological alignments. You may or may not agree with or believe in astrology, but I find it a handy tool. But because of those circumstances, it's now front and center. And what that means is we are now aware of it in a way that is constructive, in a way where we begin to make changes and take our energy from it. And so because we are in this time now, where these things have emerged now from that period of time, I call it the age of transition, because we are now in transition mode. These issues that we are now dealing with are changing rapidly. As I mentioned, the whole gay marriage situation, seemingly overnight, after decades and decades of resistance. Now all of a sudden it's almost fully accepted. Same thing I mentioned in another example was the Confederate flag, where even mentioning the idea that it should not be allowed to fly in government buildings was something you couldn't do. And now these flags are coming down. You've got companies like Walmart who are refusing to sell it. It really is that point where we're spiritually ready to do things, because all problems, the solution to all problems are always spiritual. There's no real political solution to problems. There's no economic or military solution. All of those things are just tools that we use once we have the spirit, or we've gotten to the point where we are wanting to do these things. So that's why I call it this age of transition. And last week we talked, and the week before we talked quite a bit about the economy, and we're going to get back to that, because it's a long discussion. And as we continue to transition, we're going to, of course, need to talk about it more. But this week, I wanted to talk about Millennium Goals, because Millennium Goals are gauging our transition, not just in this country, but worldwide. And I mention it because the report on the UN's Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, was released this week. And it is a measure of progress that we are making in 8 important areas. So we're going to talk about those 8 important areas that are targeted, are our goals. What we wanted to have done by 2015, and what the future Millennium Goals are going to be. So, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the best way to use your yoga practice to relieve your stress and to improve your health. So we're going to look at another pose for yoga, and we're going to talk about how microbiomes affect your brain. How about that? Fascinating stuff. And we're going to talk about climate change because a new plan has come out regarding climate change. And that again is another transition point that we'll be coming back to, I'm sure, again and again. So first, let's talk about how we... Oh, there it is. There's the story that I wanted to talk about. So, if you remember, back when the Malaysian airliner MH370 vanished, was talked quite a bit about what might have happened to that plane. There were lots of theories put forward. And what we talked about on this show was the fact that, there have been histories of planes and ships that have vanished for a variety of reasons that we still don't know about. And we talked about how there is sort of a real reluctance on the part of many to understand that mystery happens and to be able to live in that mystery, to be able to say, I don't know. Now, that painful as it was for, certainly the loved ones of the people on that plane, we understand that's hard. But the idea that somehow we know everything and that we're all of these experts were going to explain how that plane could be found, and it still hasn't been found. But however, we have some debris that washed up on a island called Reunion Island. Very interesting name for an island in Asia, and it's a wing part, and the thought is that it is from the missing Flight 370. So they've taken this part and they've sent it for analysis to France, and they will be analyzing it, I think, this week, starting Wednesday, to see if it actually is from that missing plane. And apparently, there seems to be quite a bit of confusion about what the part actually is. It was supposedly a wing part. However, now it looks like they've found more debris washing ashore on the island of Reunion here, besides that wing part. Apparently they've found one object they thought might have been part of a door, but they're not sure if it came from plane 370. Apparently it's not yet being treated as evidence, and the Malaysian officials are doubtful about that one. So, they are scouring this island now for hopefully more debris, and what they hope will be more clues to point them in the direction of what happened to the plane. Apparently, this possible door part turned out to be just a domestic ladder. Apparently, according to the Malaysia's Director General of Civil Aviation, But they're continuing this search to see if they can find more debris about this plane. Apparently, they've also found a mangled piece of metal inscribed with 2 Chinese characters attached to a leather-covered handle. I'm not sure what that is. They're not sure what that is, but they're finding all kinds of stuff. Of course, there's all kinds of debris that can be found. So, anyway, the wing part, which they feel pretty certain belongs to that plane, is being investigated in Toulouse, France. And so we'll find out later in the week, whether that part came from that plane or not. It's possible. We don't know. I've said on this show, I think that this is going to continue to be a mystery, because I think something happened to that plane that is beyond what we understand. Now, whether that is a supernatural something, which I don't rule out, as others might, but I just don't know. And that's okay to not know. It just means that something else is going on, and that eventually, we may or may learn more and become more aware of how these things happen. And this plane, this story may point us in that direction. But again, to me, the important thing is to understand that mysteries still happen. Not everything can or should be explained. So, but we'll see. Certainly, the minute they report anything, I'll be talking about it on this show for sure. All right, let's move on now to let's talk about the environment a little bit and about the new rules, so to speak, that are coming about from the Obama administration in order to meet certain goals for a greener environment. And basically, it's targeting coal-burning plants. Because coal is the dirtiest of energies, as we know, and we've known for a very long time. So this clean power plan that the president has is mainly targeted, apparently, at the electricity sector. And it's targeted at that sector because it is the largest single part of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. 31% of gas emissions come from the electricity sector. So, it apparently is going to propose deeper cuts than were originally thought or than were originally proposed last year. So this plan, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's a regulation by the EPA under the Clean Air Act that its goal is to cut carbon dioxide emissions from U.S. power plants 32% below their 2005 levels, and their target year for that is 2030, 15 years from now. Apparently it will require states to make their own cuts, and each state will have a different emissions reduction goal, and will have various options for hitting the targets. So there are going to be curbs on carbon pollution, which is what comes out of coal. And also that, let's see, the possibility, well, they're not talking much about renewable sources like solar and wind, but they are becoming, there are options that states have to use to bring down the required emissions from their particular state. So apparently the original rule that they proposed in June of last year would have only achieved a 30% emissions reduction. And now they're going for a deeper cut by about 9%. So it seems like an understanding has dawned that more needs to be done. They're talking about a clean energy incentive program. I guess that's for the states to encourage them to use renewable energy. But they're not, mandating it or anything like that. So, this is perhaps the strongest use of the EPA, certainly by the Obama administration, but even from any other previous administration. I'd have to check on the accuracy of it, but from my memory, just from my memory and estimation, I personally think this is the strongest use of the EPA since perhaps the Carter administration. Certainly, since the Reagan era, the EPA has been, not used effectively in many instances. Had the teeth taken out of it in some cases. But now there have been, gradually efforts to strengthen the EPA and its ability to actually, curb these greenhouse gases. So I think that's what this is about, and that's why you're going to hear all kinds of, shouting and grousing from, libertarians and Republicans and conservatives that feel that, again, this is the government trying to, ruin people's lives by saving the planet. I don't want to get into that now, but so it's a very interesting policy now that they've put out there, and it's again something that if you think about it, is really hopefully it's not too late, but it certainly is way behind the times. This is something that a lot of people will tell you needed to be done 10 years ago. I heard an interesting statistic here in Virginia, where I live, Northern Virginia. Apparently, by the year 2050, the sea level will have risen by several inches, and I can't remember how many inches they said, but it was quite startling. And what they said was it will basically take out certain areas of real estate in Virginia that are close to the seaboard. And this is something that we're just talking about as ho hum. This is what's this is just part of everything. This is just what happens. And yet you still have people telling us global warming isn't happening. We're talking about the fact that states are just planning that parts of their states are going to disappear under the water in the next 20 to 30 years. Another report said that Washington, D.C., which I live close by to, which was built on a swamp, is slowly sinking and will have sunk, a bit further, within another 100 years or so. Now, if we have climate change adding to that, I could possibly see that, sinking a lot faster. So, it's really kind of a wake-up call. And it certainly woke me up. Just the thought that, the state in which I'm currently residing clearly understands that part of the state will be underwater in a matter of years, and they're just, no, what can you do? It's like okay, time to move on, because I do want to get to this Millennium Development report, because it's important. So, the Millennium Development Goals that were put out by the United Nations, they began in 2000 and have been updated. The last update, I guess, was 2014, but they were updated in 2005 and so on and so forth. But basically, there are 8 goals that they had in 2000 wanted to have done by 2015. Number 1 was to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. Number 2, to achieve universal primary education for everyone. Number 3, promote gender equality. Number 4, reduce child mortality. Number 5, improve maternal health. Number 6, combat HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. Number 7, ensure environmental sustainability. And 8, to develop a global partnership for development. So the report came out today to kind of see how far we've come. So here are some of the highlights then on what we have achieved. So the first target number 1 about the extreme poverty rates and hunger. Poverty rates have been halved between 1990 and 2010. Now there are still 1.2 billion people who live in extreme poverty, but those poverty rates have been cut in half. That's very impressive in 20 years. Now, they're saying that at the start of the decade, there were some very impressive strides towards reducing the number of children who were not going to school. But now that progress, they're saying, has slackened considerably. But apparently there's still progress in that. So there's still more children getting an education than ever before. Women are assuming more power in the world's parliaments, and some of that is boosted by quota systems. And despite substantial progress, the world is still falling short of the child mortality target that was set in the Millennium Goals. Maternal mortality also needs to be reduced. They are saying poverty and lack of education perpetuate high adolescent birth rates. They're saying there's still too many new cases of HIV infection, and the environment is being threatened by global greenhouse gas emissions, which continue to go upward, and millions of hectares of forest are lost every year. So, of all the targets they've set, and official development assistance, global partnerships that they were talking about, are at their highest level, reversing a 2-year decline. So it looks to me like of all of those 8 targets, the one that is still the most problematic seems to be environmental stability. Which, interestingly enough, our government is finally on the ball with, but that took a while. But the fact of the matter is that progress is being made in all of these areas. And so now, their goals going forward after 2015 will involve, targeting income poverty. People who are working but aren't making a living wage. Sources of water. And again, the school enrollment and child mortality, those are the things that they're going to be focusing on. So the UN, members of the UN are transitioning to what they are calling a sustainable development agenda. Which include 8 anti-poverty targets. And among those things are end poverty in all its forms everywhere, and hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, and provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalization, and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So these are all more goals that world leaders have in mind. So these are the things that we are transitioning towards and making progress towards. We should always remember that we are making amazing progress in a lot of these areas. Not enough in some cases, for sure, but the willingness to continue targeting them, to continue making those goals a priority among many countries in this planet, and certainly not all. And certainly you have detractors, but the very fact that this exists at all is, it's certainly a sign that we're on our way. And we are transitioning. And so, ends another show. I plan to continue to talk about this era of transition and the things that are changing, and how fast, or maybe how slow, that transition is happening. So until next week, have a wonderful, inspiring,